Hello. Is it just me, or have like 2 or 3 of these stories happened to you guys too? Like other people's stories?
Yeah.
I was trying to think of a story to tell, and I heard my own in a weird way, and none of them were the oil drilling. Thank you, oil drilling. So my story tonight is about my cousin Norman Weiner. Yeah, that's his real name. So Norman died. He died in August 1st. He died at the age of 82. It was unexpected. Even though he was 82, he wasn't sick. He wasn't dying. He didn't know he was going to die. It wasn't one of those, he'd been sick for a long time and stuff. It was just like he had this lump, and he went to get it checked out. It was kind of a routine thing. The doctor's like, we'll take the lump out. They took the lump out. The lump was fine. But the hole made an infection, and the infection made pneumonia, and the pneumonia made no more Norman, which was really sad. Because I was pretty close with Norman. And being sort of the designated person in my family, the West Coast representative, most of my family is back east, they kind of designated that I was going to be the guy to kind of tie up the loose ends. I was going to go to his apartment, kind of go through the things, what was the stuff we're going to keep, what was the stuff we're going to get rid of, salvage, that kind of thing. And that's where I discovered Norman had a secret. So let me tell you a little bit about Norman first. Norman was a real character. Norman was very tall, which was a huge anomaly in my family. We're all normal Jewish height, sort of the cutoff, the 5'8", 5'9" cutoff. And Norman was like 6.5 feet. He had giant glasses and giant ears and a giant nose, and he would tell these stories. And oh, Corey, I gotta tell you about this wonderful movie that I saw. It was called Seven, but it was so dark, Corey. It was dark. I mean, this is a dark movie. And when the movie was over, I was looking for my sunglasses. I had my sunglasses on, Corey. He would tell these stories about these things, and Norman was a teacher. He spent his life teaching English in high schools, and he never married. He never had a partner in his life, so he traveled all by himself. He used the teacher schedule. He would go on these long summer trips, and he was a frugal guy. He saved his pennies. He'd go on like those Atlantic crossing repositioning cruises. You know what I'm talking about? Like sort of cheap, and he stayed in the hostels with the backpackers, like an old guy, because he didn't care. He didn't care. It was like he was there. He loved theater. He loved opera. He loved the arts, and he just took it in. And he didn't care about like comforts, about like staying on like the concierge level at the Marriott. He didn't care about those things. He cared about like seeing things, like getting experiences. But my whole family, like a lot of people in my family, all thought of him like they talked shit about Uncle Norman, cousin Norman. They would say he was frugal. They would say he's a cheapskate. They would talk down about these decisions that he made in his life, which I thought was terrible. Because I loved the guy. Like he would regale us with these stories because he really loved theater. He would say, "Oh, I saw Laurence Olivier, Corey. I was at the Old Vic, and it was fantastic. He was Hamlet. Oh, it was incredible." And he remembered everything. So I did a show about 10 years ago called The Asshole Monologues. It was a charity for Crohn's disease, which affects the asshole. And Norman, out of nowhere, is like, I want to write an asshole monologue, Corey, about Shakespeare's assholes. There's so many. Richard III, asshole. Like he wrote and he performed this thing. It was fantastic, and I loved it. And even on my son's birthday, he shared it with Norman. They were one day apart. So when my son Henry turned 1, we had a first and 80th birthday celebration together. It was awesome, and he took the train up. It was the cheapest way to come up from Long Beach, and he slept in our guest room, and it was really wonderful. And it was one of the last times that I saw Norman. So I'm in his apartment by myself. Like I let myself in, and I'm cleaning out his apartment, and I have that weird moment, when like I don't know if any of you have ever had to do this thing. It was my first time where you're there clearing out the stuff and deciding what to keep, what to lose, and I'm like, where's the secrets? Because I'm sad, but I'm also like alone in somebody's stuff, and it's making me think about what would it be like in my own house. Like when I go, what's the weird narrative that people are going to put together when they see my shit and my 400 snow globes and my box of random pictures and that little tiny bag of hash in the freezer and like all those things that you just have and how you're like, oh, but that's important or that's not important, and the experience was really overwhelming already, and so I packed up the car. I skipped my flight. I was supposed to fly home, but I just packed up this rental car and I drove all the way at dawn. I spent about 20 hours in his apartment clearing out the stuff. And when I got home, I looked through all these carousels of pictures that he'd taken. He traveled to dozens of countries. He had passports, 10 passports filled with visas and stamps and all this stuff. And I got to see his life through his pictures, through his eyes, the trips that he took. It was so overwhelming to see. And they weren't like pictures of him in front of stuff. It was just like what he saw. They were bad pictures. You know, like they're pictures that when you get off the tour bus you take. But it was really emotional. And then I read the will. And that's where the secret was. Because it turns out that Norman was loaded. And I was in the will. And all my fucking family, who had written off Cousin Norman, the cheapskate, the frugal cheapskate, who were never nice to Norman, and I didn't want anything from Norman. I just loved him. I loved who he was and how he was. And Norman didn't want to die. He didn't plan to die. He had enough money for 20 years of luxury travel, but he was saving it. And he gave it to my family, and now my kids can go to college, and I miss him. So thank you.